The traveling three-quarter replica of the Vietnam Memorial Wall came through Battle Creek here in July, and I went and visited the exhibition while it was here in town, and I filmed one of the presentations by some of the staff from Washington, D.C. that travel with this tour. And I wanted to include it here because it's a very informative talk on the Vietnam Memorial Wall and a lot of the history of the Vietnam War. And this is a war that has touched this nation on many levels for decades and even in current generations. So I just wanted to include this here, and I hope that you'll enjoy this video.
What we're going to do is we're going to go on the tour. We'll start on the far end, on this side here. We'll talk about the history, how this all came about, how the wall all came about. And then I'll show you some of the relics that we have on display. We'll talk about the timeline, all the other things that were different about the war in Vietnam versus other wars. Anyway, good afternoon. My name is Rodney. I'm with the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund. It's the organization that brings you the wall that heals. It's a nonprofit organization that's based out of Washington, D.C. And in 1979, there was a former Army rifleman by the name of Jan Scruggs who wanted to honor those 58,281 service members that paid the ultimate sacrifice in Vietnam. They were either killed or listed as missing in action. So what he did was he founded an organization and had fundraising. They raised over $8 million back in 1979. They had a contest to see who could come up with the best design. There were over 1,400 people that entered their projects to see who could come up with the best one. And out of all of that, during the course of a weekend, inside of an aircraft hangar at Andrews Air Force Base, they judged every single one of them. And out of all of them, there was one that was unanimously chosen. It was done by the name of Maya Lin. She was a 21-year-old architectural student at Yale University, and we'll see her picture when we go to the other side. Her creation is what you now see in Washington, D.C., the original wall. After the wall was built, what we wanted to do is replicate that experience because not everyone is able to go to Washington, D.C. or wants to go to Washington, D.C. So we built this wall that you will now see, and we travel around the continental United States and bring them to your hometown communities. And it's been quite an experience being able to do this. I've been with the organization now for a year. I'm a recently retired police officer from Los Angeles. And how I got involved with this is that we had this wall in our city. I was involved in the honor guard details and all the ceremonies, so they asked me to come to work for them, and it's been quite an experience. I missed Vietnam just by a couple of years because of my age, but I remember during the Vietnam era, I was in junior high and high school, so I remember a lot of things that were going on back then. Service members were not treated very well. They were treated horribly when they came home from Vietnam. There were a couple of things that were different about the Vietnam War also. The reason why they were treated so horribly was because there were a lot of protests. Because we were at war, we're losing a lot of casualties. And so what they did was that we're protesting the war, they took it out on the service members. They called them baby killers. They assaulted them. They treated them horribly. They spit on them. But what a way to go when you come back home to a country that doesn't appreciate you after being in a foreign country and fighting for a year. Because that's about the average time that they were in country, about a year, unless they stayed longer. So think about what life was like when they came back home, coming back to a country that did not appreciate them. So that was different. In addition to that, what was also different is that prior to that, in other wars and in Afghanistan and Iraq, you get deployed with a unit, together with a unit. You go overseas with your unit. In Vietnam, more times than not, our service members went by themselves, and they came home by themselves. I had an uncle that was sent off to Vietnam. He was at a very young age, and I remember back then when you could go up to the loading gate where you could get on the aircraft. I remember saying goodbye to him and seeing him off, and he was there by himself. There was no other service member on board with him. What a horrible thing. So think of how life was like that when they came home too. Now, one of the other things that was also different about the Vietnam War was the use of the helicopter. Whenever you see any pictures or videos related to Vietnam, you most likely hear or see the Huey helicopter. It was made by Bell Corporation. It was a small aircraft, very versatile aircraft, and we did not use helicopters prior to that to the extent that we did in Vietnam. So that small helicopter didn't occupy very much space in the landing zones, but we could accomplish a lot of different types of missions. Helicopter resupplies, equipment transports, troop inserts, troop extracts, medical evacuations called medevacs. So it's an aircraft that fit about anywhere between 10 and 12 troops in it. It had a crew of 3, a pilot, a co-pilot, and a crew chief, and sometimes a door gunner as the 4th person. Generally, they had a lot of door gunners back then. Additionally, I remember this being on the news or being in the advertisements. They had this program called From High School to Flight School. So you could actually graduate high school, join the Army, get promoted to the rank of warrant officer, go to flight school, and in a couple of years, just after graduating high school, you're flying a helicopter in combat at a very young age. So they're only maybe 19, 20 years old, approximately, flying helicopters not long after they graduate high school. So that was the high school to flight school program. And I remember them advertising it a lot on TV. What we usually do during our tours, we start with what's called our timeline. It has highlights of different things that were going during those years from 1950 to 1982. So when you get a chance, take a look at some of the bullet points that are there that were going on. So taking a look at some of the photos that we have. Of course, this is the Huey helicopter, very small aircraft, a very versatile aircraft, able to transport a lot of troops a long distance away versus having to go on ground. This second picture here, of course, is somebody who's wounded, who most likely will be medevaced by a helicopter. Now, we talked about the protests. This is a protest that occurred at Kent State University. For those of you that remember that was a major protest that occurred where they had to send the National Guard deployed out to Kent State University. And of course, because of that, we had 4 students that were killed at Kent State. We had a lot of troops that were in custody as prisoners of war. This picture here shows our last prisoners of war being taken home. So that's the reason why they're so joyful. At the end of the war, we had what's called the fall of Saigon. This picture shows that. Because what happened was Vietnam separated into two sections, North Vietnam, South Vietnam. The North was communist. The South was the free area. And so the North Vietnamese were advancing to the south toward Saigon and toward the end of the war. And of course, everybody was scrambling to safety. Now, what the United States did was they tried to get as many people out of that area to safety. And those helicopters, because of that being a lightweight helicopter, could land just about anywhere, even on rooftops. So a lot of people, that's why you see a lot of people trying to scramble for safety to get into the aircraft itself. So they cycled those aircraft from there out to safety areas, and a lot of them, those safety areas were on our ships. Aircraft carriers carried a lot of the evacuees. But what ended up happening is that we started running out of space. We had so many evacuees that were trying to get to safety. What we did to create more space is we eventually ended up throwing equipment overboard to create more space for them. And I remember this like it happened yesterday. I remember seeing them throw a completely operational helicopter overboard into the ocean just to make room. So that's what we did for their safety. Whenever we go to any city, what we want to do is, let me back up. Our overall objective as an organization is to make sure that we honor everyone that served in Vietnam. Not just those whose names are on the wall, who perished or missing in action, but we want to honor everyone. But for a particular community, we have what's called the hometown heroes. We have a database of everybody's picture whose name is on the wall, and it has their basic information on there. And you can actually look this up yourself because there's an app that we have that anybody can download for free. So we go to a certain city and we gather everybody whose name is on the wall for that particular area, for that particular county. So we have this county plus any surrounding county that touches this county, and we list those, and that's the reason why we call them the hometown heroes. So these are the ones who actually were killed in Vietnam or missing in action. And when you look at it, you'll see where they're from, along with their branch of service, their rank, date of birth, and the date of the casualty. And it also tells you what panel number and line number, and you'll learn how to find that when you go out to the wall. Now, what happened to those that served in Vietnam and later came home, survived, but came home, but died as a result of being in Vietnam? For example, exposure to Agent Orange. Many people, millions of people were exposed to Agent Orange. If they served in Vietnam, came home, and later died as a result of being in Vietnam, Agent Orange exposure, PTSD, suicides, we want to honor them in this way. We have what's called the In Memory program. And so that's the reason why some of these pictures, they look older, because they survived for several years but later died as a result of being in Vietnam. So we get those for that particular area, and we have the In Memory program, and we show them. So that's the difference between this screen and that screen. Another thing that's different about the In Memory program is that this is actually controlled by the families. So once a loved one passes away, the family submits an application to Washington, D.C., and I'll explain how to do that. We have brochures on the other side that totally explains how to do it. Once that person is accepted into the In Memory program, then your family will be invited to a ceremony, a big ceremony, the Saturday before Father's Day in Washington at the wall, and you'll be invited to go up and speak that person's name at the podium during our roll call. In fact, we just had it just a few weeks ago when I was there for this previous year. It's a huge ceremony. So if you know of anybody that you think qualifies for that, get a brochure and submit the application. Okay, come on down this way. The items that we have on display here are what's like to be operational in a typical day in Vietnam. So this uniform, the green sateen uniform, is what they normally wore. They don't use that anymore. I'll tell you, it's a hot uniform, especially if it's hot and humid. That uniform is not very comfortable. That helmet is not used anymore. These boots used to be black at one point, but they're now brown through the normal wear and tear of the use. And I just learned a couple of days ago that I thought the Navy only had these river boats, but the Army also had river boats as well. The danger in operating a river boat is that they had a lot of narrow channel waterways, and they come under fire, ambush fire, from both sides of the waterways. So they were under fire a lot. Of course, you have some other photos, and they were not always involved in combat. There was a lot of downtime, what they call rest and relaxation time, or back at the rear. So that's the reason why we have these pictures up here. Have some other things that are on display here. These two cans. Anybody know what these are? Sea rations. It's food in a can that's supposed to last about 5 years, and it tasted like it lasted 5 years. And there's a true story behind this one that I can tell you about. When I joined the Marine Corps, we had these sea rations. They were just toward the end of this, and they phased them out into MREs. But I brought one of these home, and I opened it up, tried to feed it to my dog, and the dog said, would not eat it. A dog would not eat it. But I'll tell you, when you're out in the field and you have nothing else to eat, you will eat it.
You like when you...
We had a lot, like I talk about some of the prisoners of war, we had a lot of our prisoners of war at this place called Hanoi Hilton. This is from the Hanoi Hilton. John McCain was involved in was in custody for 5 years. This was one thing that was really popular back then, is a cassette recorder. And so what the troops would do is they would record their voices, and they send it home to their loved ones so that their loved ones could hear their voice, and vice versa. They get the cassettes back and hear the messages on recorded voice. Bob Hope was very popular in Vietnam because he did a lot of USO tours, along with a couple of other people who were singers, comedians, dancers. So they had a lot of USO shows to keep the morale up for the troops out in the field. This picture right here is a picture of a Huey helicopter over one of the river boats. That was a common type of helicopter, but we also had a medium-sized helicopter, which is the CH-46 helicopter, a little bit bigger. It could accommodate more troops, and the back end went down, so you could actually drive a Jeep up into the back of it. And so they could transport more that way. But it takes up a bigger landing zone area. Let's come around to the other side. Okay, good. What I haven't talked about yet is how does one go into the military during the Vietnam era? They were drafted, many of them. It's where the government told you this is what you're going to do, this is when you're going to join the military, and more times than not, it would be the United States Army that they get drafted into. At random, what they would do is they would go down the list and they'd say, you're going to join the Marine Corps, and everybody else would be in the Army, unless they volunteered prior to that. So the majority of those that perished were in the Army, and the smaller percentage was in the Marine Corps. So this picture over here shows a lottery system of how they were chosen, and when you start your date of service. It was normally about 2 years long. Also, you see these bracelets, they're called POW MIA bracelets. Many people still wear these today. In fact, I've seen quite a few of them since we've been here. They'd have the names of those listed as prisoners of war or missing in action. And of course, those that are still missing in action, they still wear them. In fact, someone came a couple of days ago and gave me 2 of them. So it's quite an honor to receive it. Life magazine was really popular back then. My grandmother used to read Life magazine, and it had a lot of articles about the Vietnam War and our progress in the war itself. Anybody know what this is? Purple Heart. If a service member was shot or killed, then they rated a Purple Heart to wear in their uniform. So if you ever see that on a bumper sticker, in fact, I think in some states, Purple Heart recipients will have it. You can have it on your license plate. So in some states they do that. Now, there are some items that are left at the wall, whether it's in Washington, D.C., or even here. You'll see quite a few of them that are left over the past couple of days. Everything that's left, regardless of its size, has a story behind it and a feeling behind it, and a reason why it's there. This is called a care package. When a service member is deployed out in the field, they don't have the option to go to the local 7-Eleven and get their favorite items, snacks, some of the comfort items, socks, toothpaste, and so the family actually boxes it up and sends it out to them. Well, the story behind this one is this care package was sent by a mom to her son in Vietnam, and by the time it arrived to his unit, he had already been killed in action. And that's the reason why this label right here says KIA, killed in action, on October 31st, 1972. This was sent back to her. She didn't want to throw it away, so she wanted to maintain some kind of spiritual connection with her son. So rather than throw it away, she kept it in a closet, because by then, the Vietnam Memorial Wall had not been built yet. So she kept it for about 9 years, and after the wall had been built, his friend went to the mom and said, "I'd like to take this to where his name is on the wall." And so he did. I'm going to read you the note that he left behind. It says, "Charles Stewart, Mom and Dad want you to have these cookies and Kool-Aid. It's time they gave these to you, and they send their love. Signed, Gary B., and it has his location."
Oh.
Charles Stewart's picture is right here. He's the one who perished. Another item that was left by a mom was this baby sweater. And of course, she didn't want to break that spiritual connection with her son as well, so she brought this. She left it at the wall, and this is the actual note that she left at the wall as well. But I'll read you a portion of what she has in her note. It says, "My dearest son, today I'm coming to see your name on the wall. I haven't been ready until now, but I know that I must see it before I die. I miss you so much, and I think of you every day. You had so much of life to live, and your life was taken so quickly. With lump in throat and teary eyes, I'm on my way. I wanted to bring you a teddy bear, but I just couldn't part with it. Instead, I brought your first sweater. You're always in my heart. How I love you. God be with you until we meet again. Love, Mom." And this is her son. Now, we had other countries that were allies fighting in Vietnam with us, and one of them was Australia. This is an Australian hat that was left at the wall, along with this beer can, which is Foster's beer made in Australia. So this shows all the other countries that were involved in with our allies. But all different types of items are left at the wall here and in Washington, D.C. The largest item that was left was a motorcycle, but it's not this one that's here. And I'll talk about that one. So a lot of people have questions about all of those items. What happens to those items that are left at the wall? In Washington, at the end of the day, they will pick it up, they'll catalog those items and put them in a big warehouse. So think of how many items they have. This is every day. At the end of the day, they pick up everything that's left behind. So over the course of all of these years, they have a lot of items that are cataloged and kept. The only thing that they will not keep is anything that's perishable, any food. We did have, 2 trips ago, we had someone who left a plate of food at the wall, and the story behind that, I do not know, but it probably was that person's favorite food. So, like I said, there's a story for everything. Coming down this way, like I said, regardless of how the size of the item that's left, you have 4 stars that were left at the wall with a note. It was left by someone who was a platoon leader at the time in boot camp. A platoon leader is the rank of a lieutenant. The size of a platoon is approximately 65, 75 troops. And that's how many he was commanding. His platoon was involved in a firefight and he lost one of his Marines. That platoon leader later stayed in the Marine Corps and got promoted up through all the ranks, all the way up to 4-star general. But he remembered his Marine that he lost. So after the wall was built, when he got promoted to the rank of general, he went to the wall, left his 4 stars at the wall, and he said, "For Guido Farinaro, United States Marine Corps, these are yours, not mine. With love and respect, your platoon leader." And this is the general that left it behind, and this is his Marine that he lost. Remember we saw the boots that were on the other side, and I told you they were originally black leather? Well, these are the more modern boots, just like the boots that I'm wearing right now. What's the story behind that? What's the reason why it was left? It wasn't in Vietnam. But remember how we talked about how things were during the Vietnam era? When I read this letter to you, you'll put it together into perspective. It says, "Brothers, these are my lucky boots. They got me through 2 tours on the ground in Iraq. I figured you'd appreciate them more than the garbage man. The truth of the matter is, we owe you an awful lot. If your generation of Marines had not come home to jeers, insults, and protests, my generation would not come home to thanks, handshakes, and hugs." And he says, "Rest easy, gents, First Lieutenant, United States Marine Corps." So it's because of lessons learned, those that went through Vietnam, endured everything that they did, that we have now changed our way of thinking for the better. Would you agree? Do we have anybody here that served in Vietnam? There's one right there. I want to say thank you for your service and welcome home.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Do we have any other service members that served in any other time? One here, 2, 3, quite a few. Thank you for your service as well. You know, here's one thing that you probably don't hear too, and I like to do this a lot. I not only say thank you to the service members for their service, but what happens when we're deployed away? Who takes care of things back home? Who handles all the business back home when you have birthdays, you have graduations that they're not able to attend? Who handles all the bills and all the hard times back then? Family members. And that's the reason why I say thank you for your service to our country, even though you didn't serve in the military, but you served in a support role. And that's the reason why I say thank you for your service. So those of you that have family members that served, thank you for your service to our country. As I talked about earlier, Maya Lin was the person who had the wall dedicated because of her design. This is her right here. She was 21 years old, an architectural student at Yale University. I talked about Jan Scruggs, who initially got this whole project started. That's him right there. Now she's Asian. Were we fighting Asians in Vietnam? We were. So she went through quite a bit. There was quite a bit of controversy after she won. Number one, she was female, she was Asian, but she's not Vietnamese, she's Chinese, and she's American born because she was born in Ohio. Her parents immigrated from China, and that's where they settled. But after everything that she's been through, I'm really proud of her because she's actually still designing today. She's about a year younger than I am. And she's a well-accomplished person, and she has 3 honorary doctorate degrees. So good for her. The Mall of Washington has this Vietnam Memorial Wall. This is a section of the wall itself. This is my supervisor giving a tour to school children. Adjacent to the wall, on both ends, we have other statues. The 3 servicemen, we have that on one side. And on the other side, we want to honor the women that served. We have 58,281 names on the wall. 8 of them were women. They were nurses. They were all officers. So we wanted to honor them as well. So this is the reason why we have this statue. I talked about the In Memory program. We have a plaque that's dedicated for that, and that is a replica right behind you of the one that's in Washington, D.C., and that's a picture of it here. Remember I told you about this motorcycle? It was not left at the wall, but there is a story behind that. It's called the Gold Star bike. So a Gold Star family is anyone who has lost somebody in combat. If my dad were to die in combat, I would be a Gold Star son. And so that's the meaning of the Gold Star program. Now, sometimes you may see Gold Star mothers, they have a white uniform. Their uniform is actually white with yellow trim in their hats, the covers that they wear. So if you ever see that, that's a Gold Star mom, most likely. And sometimes you may see a Gold Star on the license plate or a bumper sticker. So that means that that family has lost somebody in combat. Don't confuse that with a Blue Star. The Blue Stars means that they have somebody currently on active duty. And there's one star for everybody in their family that's on active duty. The story behind this motorcycle, and this is a popular motorcycle back then, this is a chopper. We had two recruits that were joining the Army that were supposed to go together under the buddy program. They were supposed to get deployed to boot camp and deployment after that, after boot camp. Well, they did end up joining. They went to boot camp together, but they got separated. One ended up having to go to Vietnam, the other one had to go to Germany. But before they separated, they made a promise to each other. They said, if I die, I'm going to take care of your mom. If you die, I want you to take care of my mom. And that's exactly what happened. The one in Vietnam was killed. And so his surviving buddy came home, and the one who was killed, his name was Robert Cupp. The surviving buddy came home, bought this motorcycle, and he wanted a way to honor his buddy, along with other names that are on here at Paris in Vietnam. So that's the reason why on both sides you see Robert Cupp highlighted, along with some of the other names. So he took this motorcycle to Robert Cupp's mom. And he said, I want to give this to you. This is how I want to honor you. Robert Cupp's mom said, what can I do with that? I'm 80 years old. So she couldn't do anything with it because she was in her 80s. And so she donated it to our organization, and we take it with us wherever we go. It's the last item that gets loaded into the truck, into this truck here, before we go anywhere. And it's the first item that gets offloaded when we come. So it's an honor to take this and have this story behind it. Now, a lot of people ask me if I ride it. No, I don't ride it. I wish I could, but it doesn't run. But we just have it on display. What I'm going to do is, after we're done here, I'm going to introduce you to Dean. He's also my teammate. He's going to bring you down to the wall, explain how the wall is set up to you. But before we do that, I want to say thank you so much for your attention. Thanks so much for being here. For those of you that served in the military and the military families, thank you for your service to your country. And it's been an honor to meet you. Why we're here is because a few years ago, the President of the United States authorized this pin to be worn by anyone who served in Vietnam. This commemorates the 50th anniversary of the Vietnam War. He also wrote a proclamation regarding that. We have one service member here who served in Vietnam but never got his pin. Now, knowing that things are totally different when you came home from Vietnam, you didn't come home to a country that appreciated you. Today we do say thank you for your service, but you didn't hear that back then. You didn't have all the parades, you didn't have all the handshakes. But I think that through lessons learned, our history, and how we've learned through history, that we have changed our way of thinking for the better. And it's because of that I read this. By an act of Congress, the Vietnam Veterans Commemoration was founded. As a country, we're trying to right the wrongs of the 60s and 70s, when our veterans never received a proper welcome home. Those veterans who served from 1955, when we went into Laos, to 1975, when we came out of Vietnam, are considered Vietnam veterans, whether they had boots on the ground or not. It wasn't the veteran's choice where he served, but it was the government's choice to put you where you were needed. So it's our honor as a veteran, on behalf of the United States, the President of the United States, the Department of Defense, and a grateful nation, to present this pin to you as an official thank you and welcome home. And this has been a long time coming. I'm glad today is the day.
Yeah.
On a personal level, there is a program that he mentions in his talk, and that is the In Memory program. And I'm going to put a link to that in the description of this video. I have a family member that served in Vietnam, and he was in the Navy, and he had been on the coast in the Gulf of the Vietnam, and he was doing surveillance. That was his job. And he was on a destroyer out in one of the bays out in Vietnam for several weeks. And obviously he didn't have exposure in conflict other than that, but years later in his life he developed a very rare form of cancer in the throat. And research followed in years after his passing that the Australian Navy did a full investigation into it, and they discovered that many of the blue water vets were exposed to Agent Orange because the water was coming out in the rivers out into the bay, and they were recycling the water through their ships' boiler systems, and when it was distilled down and reused as potable water in the system and the ships, it was even more intense than those soldiers and other personnel that were exposed on the ground because they were drinking it, they were showering in it, and they were eating it in their food. And so he developed a very rare form of cancer and fought it like a lion. And the last 2 years of his life, he actually got to the other side of it, had been given a clean bill of health, and then probably 6 months to a year after, he had a heart attack in the middle of the night and passed away. Probably because his body was so weak and so much damage had occurred from all of the chemotherapy. So the Vietnam in Memory program is something that my family is looking into to try to honor him. And so I wanted to include that information and just tell you a little bit about that history here on the video and make that available to you if you know a family member that was a vet that may have died from either Agent Orange exposure late in life or PTSD from their time in service in the Vietnam War. You can reach out and take part in that program and have them recognized and honored in Washington, D.C. If you liked today's video, please take a minute to hit the like button down there, subscribe to the channel, and share the video with others. Thanks for watching.